Good morning, good afternoon, welcome to today's webinar entitled Configuration Made Easy, Practical Baselines for Storage and Backup Teams. Thanks for joining us today. Just before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to please use the Q&A button in Zoom. Please come through with your questions. We will try to get to your questions either throughout the webinar or at the end. And if for whatever reason we don't get a chance to respond to your questions, we will try to reply to each of you outside of the webinar. Thanks for joining us again. I'm really excited to get this webinar started and introduce our speakers. Starting with Michael Aharon, who's the Advisory Solutions Consultant from our partner Dell. This is a joint Dell and Continuity webinar. Michael spends a lot of time with various enterprise customers, advising them on all things storage and data protection, has a huge amount of experience in advising Dell customers. Thank you, Michael, for joining us today. And in addition, we have our special guest, Jeremy Colbert. Jeremy is the executive IT consultant for Colbert Tech Consulting, and him and his team work with many customers on helping to advise and consult them on enhancing and optimizing their storage infrastructure, as well as giving advice on deploying the correct storage and data protection platforms. And prior to that, Jeremy spent a number of years as Senior Director of Distributed Storage at RBC and comes with a lot of experience on best practices and advice on deploying and optimizing storage and data protection environments. And today, he'll give his advice and expertise on this topic. And finally, with us today is Yaniv Valek. Yaniv runs the product team at Continuity and specifically the flagship solution StorageGuard. For those of you who may not know, StorageGuard helps to verify and harden the security configuration of all enterprise storage and data protection environments, including Dell, and helps to ensure that these environments remain compliant with industry standards and regulations as well. And Yaniv, I'll hand over to you to kick things off.
Thank you, Doron. All right. In today's webinar, we'll focus on configuration baselines for storage and backup systems. We'll talk about why they matter, what they look like, how to get started, and stay on top of them. We'll cover practical examples. We'll introduce the concept of tiered configuration baselines. We'll discuss common pitfall or the baseline enemies and how to deal with them. And finally, we'll wrap up with some key recommendations and takeaways. All right, let's start by defining what we mean by a configuration baseline. Essentially, it's a selected set of system settings that harden our storage and backup platforms and keep them healthy, secure, and resilient, both at day one and on an ongoing basis. The baseline settings may come from the expertise of the storage and backup teams. They can come from the documentation of the storage and backup vendors, and are often also based on organizational requirement, such as information security, risk, and compliance. And this isn't just a one-off. We revisit the baseline periodically, so it addresses new best practices, latest product capabilities, and organizational requirements. A baseline typically includes core areas like authentication, encryption, role-based access, logging, and network hardening. For example, it may include enabling retention lock on backups, configuring session limits, hardening the default SAN zoning policy, and configuring syslog integration. Now, each storage and backup solution is different and has its own baseline tailored to its own capabilities and its own configuration. But the outcome is the same. By adhering to a well-maintained configuration baseline, you reduce risk, you increase health, security, and resilience across the board. Jeremy, from your experience, do most organizations actually have a clear configuration baseline today?
Yeah, Yaniv, I mean, in the talks we've had over the past, right, there's organizations doing different things, right? Many are doing it manually. Some aren't doing it at all. But this all comes down to the fact that you need some sort of way to track these baselines of your storage device configurations, right? These are attack vectors now in the new world, right? The ransomwares as a service, all the cyber attacks going on. You can see them starting to be focused towards large infrastructures, and ensuring you have a good configuration baseline, a good security posture is important. And we're all drowned by regulators and all this in across every vertical today, be it healthcare, banking, telecom. You're buried by them, and these types of configurations need to be held static and need to be monitored to ensure they aren't drifting.
These are great points, Jeremy. Completely agree. Now, to make this more practical, I want to talk about how would you go about defining a specific baseline requirement? And from our perspective, it helps doing it in a structured way. We usually recommend capturing 4 key elements. First, the summary, description, and priority of the specific configuration. The second part is the rationale, explaining why this matters, what risk it mitigates, what benefit this configuration brings, and how it maps to health, security, resilience, or compliance goals. The third part, and maybe the most important part, is the product-specific details. So each storage or backup platform has unique commands and parameters. So here we will document the exact implementation and verification steps, the relevant models or versions, and any references to vendor documentation. And finally, the life cycle. Every baseline requirement, every baseline configuration should have an owner, creation, review dates, update notes, so it stays accurate as systems evolve. This structure really helps make sure that the baselines are not just well-defined, but also maintainable and auditable over time. And just to show you an example of how it could look like, so this is a very simple example of an NTP server configuration, making sure that every storage and backup system uses at least 3 trusted time sources. We capture the rationale, keeping timestamps consistent and accurate, and we reference the relevant security and compliance standards from NIST, CIS, PCI to ISO. Then we go into product-specific details. In this case, the product is Dell PowerScale. We can see the exact CLI commands to configure and verify NTP settings, along with the supported models and documentation references. Finally, we track the life cycle, who is the author, when it was reviewed, and so on. Well, when teams first tackle configuration baselines or try to improve what they already have in place, it can feel rather overwhelming, especially in large mixed environments. So rather than aiming for perfect on day one, we suggest embracing a tiered approach where you build progressive baselines or incremental baselines, each adding a bit more control and a bit more maturity. So this way you finish one tier, you stabilize, and then you step up to the next tier without any big disruptions. And this is flexible. You can choose how many tiers and what goes into each tier based on your own risks and your own priorities. In the next slides, we'll walk through a few examples of what could belong at each tier. Starting with level 1. Level 1 is all about getting the basics right. And here are a few key examples. We could, for example, include here changing all default passwords and turning on multi-factor authentication, ensuring that only authorized users exist on our storage and backup systems, blocking by default public access to buckets, and denying by default access on the fiber channel zoning policies, disabling vulnerable and legacy protocols like Telnet and SMB version 1, encrypting data at rest where it's relevant, enabling call home for proactive support, and turning on local logging with sufficient retention. Michael, from your perspective, any additional examples to add for the essentials?
So I would say, again, based on my experience, you definitely captured the core elements that would fit into that definition of essential components that customers need to watch out for, right? And make sure they address them in their baseline. One thing that I would say that depending on the technology, right, there could be also other examples that could fall into the same category. For example, secure LDAP, SNMP version 3 with TLS, right? TLS is becoming prevalent more and more. Remote syslog server, right? So those kind of things that I would say, again, each customer needs to evaluate what fits their definition of essentials, well, and kind of go with that approach.
Absolutely. These are great examples, Michael. Thank you for that. All right, so let's continue with level 2, which builds on the basics with tighter control and tighter reliability. And here, some of the examples include configuring NTP for time synchronization, configuring session limits, integrating with Active Directory with role mapping, using secure HTTP only and restricting management access with IP ACLs. And we add remote support and email alerts for more proactive visibility. And in level 3, we're introducing more robust controls, and this may include, for example, disabling default and inactive accounts, securing SNMP, enforcing strong ciphers, hash algorithms, and keys. At this stage, we also encrypt backup traffic and management traffic and separate them across dedicated networks. We also add here centralized logging through syslog or SIM integration. And finally, we also implement dual authorization for critical or destructive actions on snapshots and backup. Michael, I'm curious to ask, do you see dual authorization becoming a standard across enterprise storage and backup systems?
Absolutely. I think it definitely is gaining more and more traction. At Dell, we do pride ourselves on offering a very wide primary storage portfolio, right? And we are staying laser focused on security. This whole concept of multi-party authorization is not new necessarily, right? And it's actively being evaluated within our customers' environments, both large and small, right? Think of this as a concept of a lockbox in a bank where you need to be accompanied by a bank employee to perform certain actions within with the lockbox, right? If you look at our portfolio, right, starting with technologies like PowerScale, Data Domain, PowerMax, multi-party authorization is an integral part of this offerings. Some examples that I can give you is operations that are related to things like snapshots, secure snapshots, volume operations. Those are the core elements, again, of what the multi-party authorization represents and needs to be tracked, obviously.
Yeah, and Michael, again, Dell's done a great job of that, right? I mean, across, binding MPA, MFA together, making those rules, making certain IDs only be able to do those very specific actions. That's another route to safety, right, against these large systems.
Correct.
Absolutely. All right, let's continue with level 4. Here we're adding more safeguards that could include, for example, NFS version 4 with Kerberos and SMB encryption to protect data in transit. We can choose to restrict anonymous user access, have tighter share level access and permissions. We can configure the internal firewall or IP filters. Here we can allow only authorized servers for services like DNS and syslog. And we can also introduce malware scanning or anomaly detection at this phase. And going to level 5, the highest tier, where we could include, for example, enabling FIPS mode, enforcing secure syslog and secure time synchronization, tightening access by disabling SSH, IPv6, IPMI, SAS connections where they're not required. You might also choose here to use an external key manager. And finally, at this level, we would want to implement a zero trust model and ensure that everything, any communication is authenticated, encrypted, and verified. Jeremy, before we move on, are there any other examples you would add here from your experience?
Yeah, but I think the list we can go on forever about the additional security steps we can take, right? I mean, there's so much around just user training, all of that stuff that's required. But the reality is, I think that this, the fortified level is where everyone kind of needs to be nowadays with everything going on out there. We have to ensure we're locking this stuff down and very, back to the key statement you made there, I think, Yaniv, was the zero trust. Everything has to be on a zero trust factor nowadays. There's just no way around it. You can't, with all the different types of attacks going on, be it phishing, vishing, whatever it is, right? And people impersonating, bringing in people into your organization that may not be safe. The only way to do it is to really fortify everything. And the only way to do that is zero trust.
That's a great point, Jeremy. All right. Now, we went through these baselines, and I want you to remember, this is just an example of a tiered baseline. Every organization is different and may have different risk tolerance. Your end state could be fortified, but it could also be advanced. The advanced may be the baseline that fits your environment today. Likewise, if you already cover the essentials, you can start your journey at a higher tier. Also, you don't have to pick one tier for everything. Different environments and workloads sometimes have different levels because some systems are naturally more sensitive or more important than others. Now, the real challenge is scale. When you're managing dozens or hundreds of arrays, backup platforms, and even SAN switches, manually implementing and verifying baselines is difficult. And this is where automation for continuous baseline verification really pays off. So you can catch deviations, catch drift, prove posture, and improve over time.
Watching for anomalies, right? Ensuring that those anomalies are caught and rectified.
Absolutely. Now, let's say you went through the tiered baseline and you've hit your target tier, which may very well be the fortified baseline. What comes next? Well, the hard part is actually staying on top. Configurations change constantly, and over time, your actual state drifts from the baseline, and there are deviations. So building continuous baseline verification into the routine is really essential. And ideally, you want to do it on a daily basis, so any drifts ties back to yesterday's activity. And this only works at scale with automation, repeatable checks that are easy to run across dozens or hundreds of systems. Then you need to keep your baselines current, periodically review vendor documentation, support articles, new features, industry best practices, and your own organizational requirements, and augment the baseline. Finally, we recommend going beyond the checklist and using configuration comparison as a means to identify other misalignments. You can compare a known hardened system against peers to reveal configuration gaps that your baseline doesn't yet cover, and consider adding them to the baseline in the future. Now, before we continue, let's discuss what the real world looks like. So most enterprises aren't dealing with one storage stack. They're managing modern environments side by side with legacy environments in multiple locations. You've got multiple.
And you're dealing with, Yaniv, you're dealing with different scale in different locations based upon your business and its approach there, and its, its entities in those locations, right? So, a single device would never fit all. I mean, it's kind of, something I had to go through over my career, is that we'll try and keep as standardized as possible, but you can't be perfectly standardized when you're running a completely different business in that locale.
Absolutely. And when you have so many moving parts, you have multiple vendors, multiple products, multiple versions, you have systems coming online, upgrades, patches, audits, and with each system needs to have 50 to 100 configurations in place. It's really challenging to keep it aligned. So Jeremy, really from your experience, I'd really love to hear what your thoughts on managing configuration baseline in such a complex environment.
Yeah, well, that's where you need to be diverse, right? You need to be able to go across that different stack of equipment, ensuring that you've got those baselines set, and then ensuring you're increasing and monitoring those baselines on a regular basis as well, right? That you're moving along, that you're progressing with the new standards that come out. The beauty in the storage world nowadays is there is some standards out there. Again, back when I think most of us started in this world, there really was no standards around storage, right? There was no NIST recommendations. There was no recommendations from any security folks on what to do with your storage devices. Now they're there. Now we have at least some sort of baseline to follow. Now we can look at those baselines and increase upon them. And I think right back to where I had spoke last time on the zero trust, that's really where you have to start. How do I lock these right down to a zero trust environment? How do I treat my storage? As important as it truly is, those assets, the data that lives there is the company's assets, and you have to ensure they're protected.
Thanks, Jeremy. That really highlights how complex things can be.
Yeah.
So what are the forces working against a clean, consistent, well-implemented baseline? So let's meet the baseline enemies or baseline challenges. Even with a solid baseline in place, there are plenty of challenges. So first and foremost, the heterogeneous large-scale environments, the more vendors, products, and versions you have, and with the high pace of deployment and decommissioning, the harder it is to stay consistent. Then add mergers and acquisitions, which introduce entirely new set of platforms and standards overnight. You also got constant configuration changes. Some of them are intentional, some are not, made by different teams, new hires, contractors, or service providers that are managing multiple customers. On top of that, product updates can often change or revert configuration silently. And finally, manual baseline checks, whether one-offs or sampling, those just don't scale, they're not repeatable, and they leave mostly blind spots and false sense of confidence. This is why automation and continuous verification are so critical for keeping the baselines intact over time. Now, keeping the baselines current and not outdated, really important in two ways. First, it helps keep the baseline working. New releases of storage and backup systems change CLI commands and APIs and UI flows. If we don't update the baseline, our implementation and verification steps will break. Sometimes it's a small tweak, an obsolete command, or a renamed flag. And sometimes it's a big change to the API model or to key features. And second, and even more importantly, you have to keep the baseline relevant. If we don't augment the baseline, it gets stale and weaker over time. We should periodically add items driven by new capabilities, vendor best practices, security advisories, industry standards, and evolving requirements from information security, risk, and compliance. That way, our baseline, not only it stays functional, but it continues to raise the bar for health, security, and resilience.
And all of that you said there, you really comes back to the automation around watching for those configuration changes. Sometimes when you're doing an upgrade of, devices, when you've got hundreds, if not thousands of them, that are doing millions of transactions, you've got to watch them. You got to make sure that those things you believe are set, and then that anomaly detection coming back to tell you that something has changed, and now you go back and review that baseline, push it back out there, and protect those devices again.
And I would also add, Yaniv, that a lot of our customers' environments are operating on a very lean IT team. So relying on products like StorageGuard is becoming essential, right? Because you take the most of the burden away from IT teams.
Absolutely. And that brings us actually to the very next point. We talked about what and why, and I want to expand on the how, and specifically how StorageGuard helps make this all practical and scalable. So StorageGuard is a software solution that continuously verifies configurations for storage and backup systems, detecting drift from your target baseline and validating them against industry standards, security advisories, and vendor best practices. It is purpose-built for block, NAS, objects, and hyperconvergent cloud storage, along with data protection systems like backup software and appliances. And beyond the vast library of built-in configuration checks, you can even define your own custom configuration controls. Now, StorageGuard is quick to deploy and simple to run. On step 1, you define your target baselines. You can use the StorageGuard built-in policies or built-in baselines, or you can choose to assemble your own by selecting from the library of ready-made configuration checks, or you can add custom checks. On step 2, you set up the scan. You can run agentless, read-only configuration scans on storage and backup systems. These authenticated scans can be either scheduled or run on demand, and within minutes, you can already review results. Step number 3 is about reviewing and remediating findings. The StorageGuard reports show both positive reporting and negative reporting. You can see the deviations. Each of them is represented as a detailed finding that includes evidence and clear remediation guidance and commands. Then on step number 4, you can track adherence. Our dashboard will show you your overall baseline score, trend over time, and remediation progress by product and severity. As a complementary feature, StorageGuard also enables you to compare system configurations against a designated system that represents the golden configuration. Differences are summarized and highlighted, enabling you to spot impactful deviations that your baselines may have missed and potentially need to be addressed and even added to the baseline. And now, to share more on how Dell and StorageGuard are working together to bring these capabilities into enterprise environments, I'll hand it over to Michael.
Thank you, Yaniv. Yeah, so first of all, I'd like to say that we do take security very seriously at Dell, right? It starts from the fact that our development is following the secure development lifecycle management methodology, right? It's the supply chain, the security inherent in our hardware, starting with the trusted platform module, the root of trust, and so forth. So all of those elements add up to this platform provided within our portfolio being very, very secure. Now, our partnership with Continuity ensures we leave no stone unturned, right? The danger from the ransomware attacks is actually real, right? It's not a matter of when or if, it's essentially how soon, right? So you do need to be ready for that and ensure that your crown jewels are protected at all times. We do provide our customers with, obviously, with guidance and security configuration guides and so forth. However, with partnership with Continuity and products like StorageGuard, we were able to define and detect configuration baselines and ensure that any changes are tracked and actually logged, right, and reported on. So the ability to anticipate, withstand, and recover from incidents are the key elements, and that's the whole purpose of this, right? StorageGuard continuously scans Dell systems to ensure that customers are secure and protected and follow the best practices. The other part of this is that staying on top of security advisors alone could be a full-time job, and this is again where StorageGuard shines and takes away the burden away from the IT teams, and they can in turn focus on better things to ensure that the environment is protected and secured. Right? If you do want to stay informed of everything that's going on within your environment, you could integrate it via REST API calls with other tools within your environment. One example will be a ServiceNow, right, which a lot of customers use as a typical ITSM tool. And of course, last but not least, is the fact that customers have to comply with a lot of various regulations. And Jeremy mentioned this, right? Coming from a very large bank, it is, I guess, a big part of this. And this is again somewhere where StorageGuard can provide a lot of value and ensure that customers are compliant with those requirements.
And Michael, that in my new gig, as I talk to people in those other verticals in healthcare and telecom and all this, I didn't realize that regulatory scrutiny that happens in the finance space happens to them just as well. Different regulators, but the same basic ground rules. So
of course. Yeah, and this basically allows customers to be able to provide proof that they are compliant with those regulatory compliance requirements to their auditors, right? It's a simple matter of running a report, from StorageGuard and producing that proof that the environment is protected and compliant. However, saying all of this, that obviously doesn't preclude customers from following the typical best practices. You got to have your DR, you got to have your replication in place, you got to have your backup in place. And this is where obviously Dell, with our wide portfolio of primary storage products, can definitely provide a lot of benefits and value to our customers.
And Michael, thanks for saying that, because I think that sometimes people forget the basics too. You do have to have those basics in place as well.
Correct. Back over to you, Yaniv.
Thank you, Michael, for expanding on this. All right, let's wrap up with a few key recommendations. We highly recommend using tiered baselines, advancing incrementally toward a secure and resilient configuration. Then keep your baseline current with the latest best practices, capabilities, and requirements. Implement automation to identify deviations as they occur, because that's the only way to do it in a way that is repeatable and scalable. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Jeremy and then to Michael for their closing thoughts and takeaways.
Yeah, thanks, Yaniv. Yeah, so I mean, I guess again, I'm going to reiterate some of the stuff I said before. All of the, and I'm sure this covers stuff Michael and yourself said too about attacks and all of this going on. In Canada, actually, we just, one of our biggest retailers just came out this week saying they've been subject to a cyber attack, data loss. And this is to us Canucks up here, this is huge because this is Canadian Tire. So everyone in the country uses Canadian Tire somehow. I know elsewhere in the world that probably doesn't mean a lot, but every single one of us in Canada interact with that company somehow. They have several subsidiary companies we all deal with. Big deal, right? So again, and happening daily, these announcements come out every day about someone being attacked, and this is where, as the practitioners, we're in the space to stop and thwart those attacks. And things like this are the key to it, right? So we've got to build, again, where, you asked me how many people are doing this. Yes, there's lots out there doing it on their own. There's lots doing it with software as well. I mean, in my space, I had a wonderful team. And when I was in the large organization that built out a great framework for watching and checking on this stuff. But again, my worry about that, and even my worry that we had mentioned to regulators, to our auditors at the time, was that, we do have the fox building the hen house here. That's a little scary. Having an independent auditor come in is much better. And that's really what Continuity is doing here. They are the independent auditor of what's going on with these systems and watching those baselines, ensuring they aren't drifting, applying the automation to put them back. Extremely important. Michael, I think you hit on it very well too. No, these organizations aren't growing in people, but they are growing in devices and they are growing in data. So in order to protect yourself from that, you need the automation. You need tools like this to help protect your environment.
100%.
Over to you,
And I
sir.
would, thank you, Jeremy. And I would just add that, we've discussed about a lot of important information here. And this is why Dell has a very, very strategic partnership with Continuity, right? We certainly want to help our customers to stay on top of those the whole topic of security in relation to infrastructure and protecting their crown jewel applications, right? Now, I do encourage you to reach out to your Dell account teams, because we can actually take it from start to finish and kind of work with Continuity on performing analysis, demo the product, quote the product, and basically start it from A to Z, right? We do also offer this as a managed services offering. So again, I do encourage you to reach out to your Dell representatives and ask them to basically expand on this topic post this webinar. But otherwise, I want to thank everyone for attending. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you very much, Jeremy and Michael. Doron, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael, Jeremy, and Yaniv. Really, really engaging, really interesting webinar. There have been some questions coming through, and our team have tried to hopefully answer the questions online, but due to time, we weren't able to get to them live. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for phenomenal speakers. One of the common questions that have come up is this session recorded? So the good news is the session has been recorded. I should have probably mentioned that at the beginning. We will share the recording probably early next week with all participants, whether you attended or not. So thank you again for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you very much, folks. You take care of yourselves.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.